I want to thank Tom for filling in here a bit with some photos. I didn't put something together for this. We've been doing this for a number of years, and the idea is to take the best of the advanced selections, mainly out of that have been growing in Randy Honcoop's area, and put them into larger trials on farms to see how they produce. Tom's got a few pictures here. Like I say, let's see. You know, we're putting them in at about 100 plants to 250 plants per planting, and we're putting them on different soil types. One of the big things is root rot, and we've got a fantastic site that will kill these plants if they have problems. So, why don't you go ahead, Tom?
All right.
What you got?
Okay. So I am pretty new to this project. Just this.
What I should say is Tom's going to be taking over the majority of this action because most of these plantings are up here in this area. And logistically, for me to get up here from Portland has been an issue. It's been a bottleneck to be able to observe them frequently enough. So thank you very much to Tom for joining in here.
So, and lucky me, I get the good fortune of being able to walk into this environment where Tom and his crew have already set up these trials with the growers. And so it's great because you get to walk in and just start looking at plants right away. So I've got just a couple of slides here, but they're from 3 of the trials that were set up with the growers and with Tom and his crew. 2 of them are with Rob Dollywall on some pretty well-drained soil, also on pieces of ground that got a lot of cold temperature pressure this last spring. So we had a really good sort out for winter hardiness there. And then, of course, as Tom mentioned already, we've got a cooperator, Ralph Meinecker, who's got some soil where there's very heavy root rot pressure. And you can really see differences in root rot tolerance there.
At that site, we've got a lot of Cascade Bounty, which is a wonderful standard to compare the other ones to.
Yeah. So the first picture or 2 that I have here are from the 2017 planted trial at Rob's. And again, this is on a well-drained soil, but it is a place where we had very severe winter injury. You know, if driving by this field, in May, you'd immediately see, you know, a lot of barren arcs on Meeker. So Meeker was really badly damaged in this field. There was some Lewis next to it that was not doing too badly. And then there was the trial. There were 2 rows of trial, about 150 plants of these 6 different selections. And, you know, as growers often do, Rob kind of took me aside when I started walking into the trial, and he said, you know, 2 of these are pretty good, and the other 4, I'm not so sure about them. So good information, and it was pretty easy to see what the 2 were that looked really, really good. And one of those, of course, was Cascade Premier, which has been described many years previously as WSU-2166. What you could see about it in this trial was that there was really good bud break all up and down the laterals in spite of the severe winter damage pressure. And the laterals on 2166 Cascade Premier are really, really long. So here's a particularly long example, right? You can see this is just sticking way the heck out there. I don't know if this will become an issue with Premier or not. I hope not. There's a fair amount of acres of it planted out there, and it seems to be doing all right so far. Certainly in this trial, we did not see a lot of problem with lateral damage, but it's got, in this trial anyway, very long laterals, especially lower on the plant. The fruit, obviously from the picture here, it's very large. In this trial, the flavor was good, and there's enough acidity there to give it a pleasant, bright flavor. It tasted to me like it would hold up well to processing. Notes from the harvester: heavy yield, slight mold, less than Meeker in this field, and a few greens, but no terrible problem. So it looked like a machine set up for Meeker was harvesting Cascade Premier pretty well. Oh, let's see, I got it. There we go. The other selection that I think was the one that Rob liked as well, and that I certainly liked in this field, was WSU-2188. This is one that, if I understand it right, WSU is considering releasing, possibly doing some larger scale testing on to see how well it will IQF. This plant, like WSU-2188, had good growth, although the stature is a little bit smaller than Cascade Premier in this trial. The yield, just visually on the plants, did not look quite up to Cascade Premier's level, but again, Premier is a pretty heavy yielding variety, and that's really just an anecdotal observation. The flavor, again, like Cascade Premier, flavor was very good. Fruit is large. Color looked a bit darker than 2166 Cascade Premier, which is probably a good thing for a lot of the different processing markets. On the harvester, we had very little or no mold on this one, which was kind of remarkable in this particular trial. We did have a few greens, but nothing terrible. Tom, did you have a comment on 2188? Okay. All right. Let's see.
You know, what I was going to say is one of the big things on these trials is what we rule out, not what you're seeing, but we're weeding out these things that look good in the 6-plot trials. When you get them into these larger trials, probably 75% of them get weeded out. So it's really nice to be able to focus in on these before they get any further in the system.
I am so glad you said that. That you said that we weed them out, because that's just about what I was going to get to. At this same trial, you know, well done. I didn't even see that you did that. We had 1914 there as well. 1914 had good growth, seemed to be winter hardy, at least based on the bud break that we saw there. Moderate size, yield looked all right. It was, you know, kind of right up there with these others. On the other hand, the receptacle opening was really large on these. Also on the harvester, we saw a lot more mold in the 1914s than we did in many of the other things. And the color, possibly a little light, but you know, it certainly did not seem to be on the level with 2188 and Cascade Premier. We also have in this trial WSU 2110, darker and smaller than Premier, sort of a less acid flavor. You know, I prefer kind of that brighter flavor of Cascade Premier. This had flatter, maybe less acids in it. Had some mold issue, but did harvest pretty well. One of the things that was interesting in this trial was that almost everything machine harvested well, and I think we can attribute that to Pat's machine harvesting trials. They have to make it through that before they get through this. We also had a 2162, WSU 2162, even darker fruit, you know, maybe a little too much on the dark side. Also had that, to me, a flat flavor. And we noticed mold problems on the plant as well as on the harvester on this one. 2162, I'm not sure I've got a picture of it here, but it was very late harvesting. If you were looking at a raspberry and wanted to go further into the season, maybe get into more of a Wakefield kind of a season, this variety looked promising for that. I'm going to shift over here to a trial that was just planted in 2018. So this is a baby crop year for this trial, right? So it's hard to say a whole lot based on the baby crop, but can say a few things anyway. We had WSU 2068 there. Actually, before I get to that, I'm going to show you these. This is 1962, and this is a great example of being able to weed out a selection based on this kind of a trial. This variety, 1962, was both in the Dollywall 2018 trial, and it's at Ralph Meineker's, and in both of those places, you see just this. Under a tough winter, you have the upper part of the floricanes are just barren, and there's very little fruit there. It's too bad, but better to find out at this stage than at a later stage. Also, at Rob's 2018 trial, we had WSU 2068. My notes on this one are that, we have slender canes, good bud break, not too bad winter injury, which is really good to know. Good fruit flavor. We also had WSU 2069, where we had kind of marginal floricane growth, but I think that was just a plant establishment issue, not necessarily a winter injury issue. We also had good flavor on the fruit, and looking forward to seeing more from 2068 and 2069 as they mature and get a little more developed in this trial. Let's see. Do you have anything you need to say right now, Tom, or should I keep going?
Well, I don't want to interrupt your flow if you've got some more things going. I would just like to say a couple of things. It's number one, these are available for trials for you guys to come visit. And I don't think nearly enough growers take advantage of that to come out or get a hold of us or Ralph or Rob, because these are paid for by the commission. And if you're interested in getting a preview of how some of these things are looking, I'd really recommend you do so. Get a hold of one of us and get a look at these. Also, just a couple of our cooperators is Northwest Plants is providing a lot of these plants, which is great. And they're paid for by the commission, as I said. So that was all. I just wanted to really encourage growers to get out there and look at these things themselves.
Can we put a plug in here for more cooperators?
Cooperators.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
I think,
when we first started this, I was trying to have more trials down south. And the raspberry industry down there, the process is pretty much gone at this point. So we're concentrating them more in this area. And Ralph Meineker has been terrific. Rob Dallowald, John Clark has put in a number of them. We would love to have more cooperators.
Because I think these trials fill a gap. Oftentimes breeders will send material out to folks for grower trials, but then, it gets lost in the shuffle. The information from those grower trials can get lost in the shuffle really easily, especially because the most important times to visit them are the times that growers are the busiest. And so having trials like this helps that information get out to folks beyond whoever is hosting the trial. Let's see. I've got a few pictures here from Ralph Meineker's trial. Ralph has been a great supporter of this project for a long time, and we really owe him a debt of gratitude, both for being kind enough to put a lot of these things in, and for the fact that he has ground that is an excellent root rot screen. So what you can see here is this is 2 rows of raspberries on your, I think it's going to be on your left, is WSU 2188. It's a little hard to see it here, but this is a dip in the field. This is that 2188 field was doing really well in the lighter soil parts of the field, but in this dip, plants are gone. And the plant on the right-hand side is Cascade Premier. Cascade Premier in this row is holding up pretty darn well to really tough root rot pressure. It's not immune. You can walk up and down this row and you can see plants that are affected by root rot. But it's certainly doing well compared to most other things there. So based on, at this site, the 2188 does not look like it's holding up as well. as Cascade Premier is.
And the wonderful thing, as I mentioned before, is these are planted amongst Cascade Bounty. So we've got kind of a number 10 rating, and it's easy to rate these other ones under the same conditions.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I would say if Cascade Bounty would be a 10 in this field, Premier would be something on the order of an 8.
It's amazing how well Cascade Bounty holds up. If it was just a little bit better on fruit quality, I think we'd see much more of it.
Yeah. Let's see. I put this in here just as an example of 2 selections with different levels of winter hardiness. So we've got WSU 2010 on the left, where you can see that, you know, there's a lot of new laterals coming out of that floricane. It looks nice and fuzzy. And then WSU 1962 is on the right, and there's a lot more blind laterals there, the blind buds there. Also at this trial, we had WSU 2069. Again, that's the same one that we have that at Rob Dollywall's as well. At Ralph's, again, the cold hardiness looked good as it did at Rob's. Plant vigor was good, more vigorous than Cascade Bounty, which is interesting in that environment. Early fruiting and root rot tolerance looked good and nearly thornless. We also have several other selections there. WSU 2063, which had good winter hardiness. It was a good year to screen for that. Also had WSU 2010, which was probably winter hardy, but unfortunately pretty susceptible to rust, like Meeker is. And we had 1962. That's the one that you see here that had so much problem with winter hardiness. And I think that's about all I've got for pictures for that.
I would just say that Wendy is spearheading putting in a specialty crop grant this next year, because what we really like to do is go to even larger blocks so we could evaluate the IQF quality. And the size block is a bit in flux, but that would be the next step. If these are going in at 100 to 250 plants per trial, those would be going in. What was the size of those trials that you had written up at this point, Wendy?
We had gotten recommendations that it needs to be over 2 acres and with an ideal size of 5 acres for the IQF testing.
And obviously that is a huge barrier to put in that many plants for a trial. But this would be, if we get them to this stage, to put in something like Cascade Premier a couple of years ago, if we would have had that kind of data, it would have been excellent for growers to be able to mitigate their risk. You'd know pretty well, and suppliers and propagators, they can go forward with much more confidence if we can get this information up front, so that you're not taking as much risk when you're putting something in. You can see exactly what you're going to be getting. So hopefully we can move that forward. That's the next step.
And the reason that those plots need to be so big to do an IQF trial is that you need enough fruit, so that enough of a planting so that you can get 1,000 pounds of fruit at a time or more, depending upon the IQF tunnel that you're using. Enough fruit to really get a good slug going through that tunnel when it's already set, and to have enough fruit going through there that it's not all mixed with whatever preceded it or whatever is following it, right? So you need to get enough through the tunnel so you can get a good read on it. And hopefully you need to have enough so that you don't only have enough fruit in the heaviest harvest, that you've got enough fruit early and late as well. So you can get several reads on that thing and really know whether it's going to be good enough for IQF under those conditions or not. And that's a tall order. That needs a pretty good sized planning to do that. Wendy, I know that WSU 2188 is one selection that we could conceivably have enough plants of to do those scale of trials. Are there other selections that we would have enough plants of to do those?
Well, we were also hoping to put Premier in to get a really good evaluation of Premier. So the plan was for 2188 and 2166. And then other selections are maybe at a smaller plot evaluation stage.
Yeah.
Maybe not at the IQF level, though.
Okay. Sounds good.
Did I answer your
Okay.
question?
Yep.
Sure
Okay.
did. Thank you.
I think we're out of stuff up here unless you got something else to add. Questions? Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Awesome.